of the department. We have with us today Professor Mohmmed Ishaq, a renowned historian and former Dean Academic Affairs and Dean Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Kashmir. He is author of 9 books, including Kashmir's Transition to Islam, The Role of Muslim Rashis, Experiencing Islam, Biographical Dictionary of Sufism in South Asia, Sufis of Kashmir, Meditated Invocation, or Fatiha, with translation and annotation. He has also published 32 research papers in academic journals of international repute. He is most widely quoted historian on Islam and Kashmir across the globe. He is one of the few leading scholars of South Asia who have made a distinctive contribution to Shah-I-Hamadan studies. Professor Khan has been kind to us, who accepted our request to present his keynote address on the theme of the seminar. May I have the privilege to request Professor Khan to kindly deliver the keynote address. Professor Khan.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, Professor Mohammad Amin Sofi, His Excellency, Ambassador Republic of Tajikistan, Director, Iran Culture House, Delhi, Professor Azizuddin, Professor Hamid Naseem Marazi, distinguished guests, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. It is a matter of honor and privilege to be invited to present a keynote address at an august gathering like the present one. Although Shah-I-Hamadan Institute of Islamic Studies has been in existence for over 2 decades, an opportunity for attending an international seminar under its auspices today is the first of its kind. It's encouraging to see the participation of a large number of scholars, including some non-Muslims, in this seminar. Having accepted the responsibility of presenting the keynote address, I will endeavor to provide some kind of framework for your discussions and share with you some of my ideas on the contemporary relevance of the teachings of Shah-I-Hamadan. What has prompted me to revitalize my thinking on the subject of such immense significance is somewhat exaggerated importance given to job-oriented courses in our universities in view of the rapid strides in both global and domestic market. While I'm aware of the importance of such courses, I feel a need to revamp the marketopian thinking about the university degrees that has, for the last 2 decades or so, begun to exert a peculiar hold over the higher authorities of our universities. Somehow, we have grown to believe that market disciplines could solve all our problems. The economic development of a society is of no use in the long run if in the new globally competitive environment, young boys and girls are only trained to mint money at the cost of higher spiritual and ethical values. Does not our growing obsession with mere material needs and comforts pose a serious challenge to the very concept of a university? Is it that our universities should only reorient their courses to include a sustainable material development focus without a focus on ethical education? While I may sound traditional to some, nevertheless, my lifelong infatuation with the subject known as Sufism provides the perspective for the need to develop true human personalities. Does our university's timeless motto, "Min az-zulumat ila an-nur," from darkness to light, have any bearing on my keynote address? Sufism, it must be stressed, is mysticism in one sense, in that its primary aim is spiritual apprehension of the truths that are beyond the understanding of a rationalist. Consider what Bertrand Russell aptly remarks: You cannot be a mystic and a rational person at one and the same time. Certainly, a mystic or a Sufi who seeks mystical union or communion with God by contemplation and relative seclusion experiences something which is beyond description and any logical explanation. Long back, in what was termed a hard-hitting critique of Sufism in India, I had pointed to superficiality of making the two kinds of mystical experiences, Wahdatul Wujud and Wahdatul Shuhud, the tools of historical analysis. The point that I had strongly made was that mystical experience is intrinsically a subjective experience, hence beyond the explanation of rationalist philosophers, historians, and scholars. It is no surprise, therefore, that the great masters of Sufism have been misunderstood and misinterpreted, thanks to a rational or even superficial understanding of their mystical experiences by some Muslim scholars as well as Western Orientalists. Among such Sufis must be particularly mentioned Hussain bin Hallaj, bin Mansur Hallaj, and Sheikh Akbar ibn Arabi. It is another matter that ecstatic utterances of such Sufis under the influence of a mystical experience were best understood by the Sufis themselves with a burning love for Allah, and in fact inspired a vast production of Sufi literature concerning divine love in prose and poetry. Leaving aside, therefore, the abiding contribution of Sufis in deepening our understanding of Allah as Haqq alone through personal devotion, passion, and communion, there is a need to understand, besides mystical, the historical dimension of Sufism. It must be stressed that Islam, in its various historical manifestations, is not a single or monolithic entity. Islam's initial role in shaking the very foundations of societies notwithstanding, there is strong reason to argue that Islam did not radically transform or revolutionize societies in one go. Apart from certain individual conversions, the transition of societies to Islam over long centuries past was by and large a matter of social conversion rather than religious in the strictest sense. Given the fact that various cultures in South Asian context had a vast potential for countering the influence of Islam either in the revival of Hinduism in the form of Bhakti movement or the emergence of syncretistic beliefs among the converts to Islam, historical circumstances therefore created conditions for diffusion of its teachings in varied historical and regional contexts, contrasting the pagan society of the 7th century Arabia. Little wonder that Islam, in its historical manifestations, has been designated as Indian Islam, Indonesian Islam, African Islam, Kashmiri Islam, and so on. And in the context of ongoing debate concerning the so-called Sufi Islam versus Wahhabi Islam, or the so-called Arab Islam versus Sufi Islam, misconceptions arise about a multiplicity of phenomena, or if one may assert, many Islams. In order to dispel such misconceptions, it is necessary to assess the significance of the historical role of Mir Sayyid Ali Hamadani, rahmatullahi alayh, popularly known as Shah-I-Hamadan, as a case study. It is now historically established that Mir Sayyid Ali Hamadani visited Kashmir only once in 1384 and stayed there for not more than 6 months. Far from asserting in the manner of Persian chroniclers and hagiographers that the wholesale conversion of Kashmir took place during his sojourn in the valley, I would make a strong plea for re-examination of the latter-day Persian sources written over 175 years after the death of the Sayyid. The emphasis of these sources is more and more on his miraculous achievements rather than on his historical role. It is somewhat intriguing that the Sanskrit chroniclers, Pandit Shrivar and Pandit Jonraj, who were near contemporaries of Sayyid Ali Hamadani, did not refer to him at all in their works, notwithstanding their useful account of the inroads of Islam in the cultural life of the Kashmiri Brahmins. But more surprising than the silence of the Brahmin chroniclers regarding the Sayyid is the lack of information with regard to his so-called proselytizing activities in a plethora of works of the Sayyid himself, or that of his contemporary biographer and Khalifa, Nuruddin Jafar Badakhshi. True, Jafar Badakhshi's Khalifa, Haidar Badakhshi, in his biography of the Sayyid, in a brief passage, describes his role in Kashmir, but beyond referring to the Sayyid's encounter with the Brahmin ascetic in Srinagar, his close ties with the reigning Sultan Qutbuddin in Piri-Muridi relationship, or the general statement that he brought Islam to Kashmir, Haidar Badakhshi has nothing more to say. So this lacuna in the contemporary sources of the Sayyid gives enough leeway to the latter-day chroniclers, even Sayyid Ali, not Sayyid Ali himself, but Sayyid Ali, the chronicler, the author of Tariq-e-Kashmir, to indulge in fancies and exaggerated description of Shah-I-Hamadan's role. Shah-I-Hamadan's writings bore the impress of the teachings of Imam Ghazali and Ibn Arabi, both widely remembered and respected to this day in academic centers of excellence across the globe for promoting an understanding of Islam in consonance with the spiritual ethics of the Quran. But this fact does not warrant the assertion that he had nothing to do with the Sharia. As a matter of fact, his advice to the reigning Sultan was to strictly adhere himself to its implementation in respect of good governance. But what must be significantly stressed is that far from imparting the knowledge of the Sharia within the framework of an ideology, Shah-I-Hamadan, like most leading figures of the major Sufi orders, understood the Sharia in terms of its eternal significance for the spiritual and moral uplift of a society on the crossroads. It is no surprise, therefore, that his emphasis that the Sultan of Kashmir should rule his subjects within the widening horizons of the concept of justice, adl, enshrined in the Sharia, did not bring him in conflict with the policy of religious tolerance followed by Sultan Qutbuddin in his kingdom, in which Muslims formed a tiny minority. It did not matter to the Brahmins that if the king adhered to the Sharia in personal life, or for that matter ruled his subjects in consonance with its spiritual and social ethics. This explains that Shah-I-Hamadan commanded respect of the Brahmins in the heart of their hearts, let alone their silence about him. But the Kashmiri Brahmins, known from the time of the Hindu rulers for their protests, would have certainly raised hue and cry had they felt any threat to their religion in the wake of the advent of Shah-I-Hamadan in the valley. As a matter of historical reality, the Brahmins better understood the role of Shah-I-Hamadan as a teacher par excellence than a radical Muslim bent on converting Kashmir en masse. And nothing explains this phenomenon than the emergence of two distinct religious identities in the valley, Kashmiri Muslim and Kashmiri Pandit, following the advent of Shah-I-Hamadan. Significantly, prior to his advent, such identities did not exist in explicit terms. This despite the role played by Sheikh Sharafuddin Sohrawardi in securing conversion of the Buddhist ruler of Kashmir, Renchana, to Islam, and given by him to the Kashmiris as a parting gift. Did the ritual of reciting the Awrad-e-Fathiya, allowed in course, which first originated at the Khanqa-e-Mu'alla in the Hindu-Buddhist surroundings, have anything to do with Kashmir's gradual transition to Islam during a course of 5 centuries of Islamic acculturation? This is a significant issue which I have discussed at some length in my research work. It will here suffice to reinforce my point about the force of an Islamic tradition of reciting zikr, though essentially rooted in the Quran, assuming the form of what I would call Islamic cultural tradition in a regional setting. Unfortunately, this latter-day development within the fold of Islam is not comprehensible to some. Hence, they consider it to be an innovation or a bid'ah. Perhaps I may sound more clear by quoting a leading contemporary authority on Sufism, who brilliantly echoes the views which I expressed earlier in my work in 1997 at the height of militancy in the Valley. The title of my work, Experiencing Islam. Islam or Sufism, historical